3 out of 4. That's roughly the proportion of regrets. When researchers asked people to look back across an entire life, that turned out to be things they never did. Not the affairs, not the failed businesses, not the sentences said in anger at 2 in the morning. The unmade call, the unsent application, the room they stood outside of and never entered. Safety has a bill, it simply doesn't arrive on the day you buy it. And there's something stranger underneath that number, something a Dutch traffic engineer proved almost by accident in a small northern town by tearing every safety device out of a busy intersection and watching what happened to the people who drove through it. You've been taught that caution reduces danger. It doesn't. It relocates it. It moves the danger somewhere you have quietly agreed not to look. Finding one. The intersection with no rules. The town is called Drachten, population around 40,000 in the Dutch province of Friesland. In the early 2000s, a traffic engineer named Hans Monderman took one of its busiest junctions, the Loveplein, and did something that should have produced a massacre. He removed the traffic lights. He removed the signs. He removed the painted lane markings, the curbs separating car from pedestrian, the barriers, the signals telling you when to walk. He left an open square where thousands of vehicles, cyclists, and people on foot met every day with no instruction whatsoever about who had the right to go first. Everyone waited for the crash. The crashes went down. Traffic moved through faster than it had with the lights. Injuries dropped. And the reason had nothing to do with engineering. Monderman had discovered that when you strip away the visible architecture of safety, human beings stop obeying the system and start reading each other. Eye contact returns. Speed drops without a sign telling anyone to drop it. The driver becomes a person negotiating with other people instead of a unit processing a signal. Monderman used to demonstrate it by walking backwards into the middle of his own redesigned junction with his eyes closed. Nothing hit him. The uncertainty made everyone careful. Now hold that against something an economist named Sam Peltzman published in 1975 in the Journal of Political Economy. Peltzman studied what happened after American cars were legally required to have seatbelts, padded dashboards, collapsing steering columns. Deaths among drivers fell, exactly as intended, but he found something else in the data. Pedestrian deaths rose, cyclist deaths rose, non-occupant casualties climbed in a way that partly canceled the gains. His conclusion was that drivers who felt protected drove differently, faster, closer, later on the brake. His numbers have been argued over for 50 years. The mechanism he named has not been argued away. It has a name now: risk compensation. And it has been found in ski helmets, in child-proof caps, in football padding, in financial regulation. Here is what it means, stated plainly. Human beings do not carry a fixed amount of risk. They carry a fixed appetite for the feeling of risk. When you lower the sensation, the behavior expands to fill the space. Protection doesn't remove danger from your life. It removes danger from your awareness, and your awareness is the only instrument you have. Which raises the question this entire thing turns on. If you have built a life engineered for safety, the stable job, the low-conflict relationship, the opinions that offend no one, the ambitions sized to be achievable, where did your risk go? It didn't evaporate. It never does. It went somewhere with no dashboard. Finding 2. The 2.5. In 1979, Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky published the paper that eventually took the Nobel Prize. They had found that human beings do not evaluate outcomes. They evaluate changes, measured from wherever they currently stand, and that the pain of losing something runs roughly 2 to 2.5 times hotter than the pleasure of gaining the same thing. Lose 100, gain 100, same arithmetic, wildly asymmetric nervous system. Most people have heard some version of this. Almost nobody has heard the second half, and the second half is where it turns dark. Kahneman and Tversky found that loss aversion doesn't make people cautious. It makes them cautious in one direction only. When a choice is framed as a possible gain, a new venture, a new city, an unfamiliar opportunity, people become risk-averse. They take the sure, small thing over the uncertain, large thing, predictable. But when the same person is framed into the loss column, when they're already down, already sunk, already behind, the polarity flips completely. They become risk-seeking. They will take a wild, low-probability gamble to avoid locking in a certain loss. Kahneman called it the reflection effect. Read that again and let it land where it's supposed to land. The cautious person is not cautious. The cautious person is a gambler who only gambles when losing. You can watch this in the data. In 1998, a finance researcher named Terrance Odean examined about 10,000 accounts at a discount brokerage. He found that investors sold their winning positions dramatically more often than their losing ones, roughly 50% more. They cut what was working. They clung to what was bleeding, not because they were stupid, because selling a loser converts a floating loss into a real one, and the nervous system will do almost anything to avoid signing that document. Now take that mechanism out of the stock market and put it in a life. The career that stopped fitting 6 years ago. Do you leave? No. Leaving would realize the loss. Staying keeps it theoretical. The relationship that has been quietly dead since a specific evening you both remember. Do you end it? No. Ending it makes the wasted years official. The degree, the city, the identity, the version of yourself you announce to people at 24. Every one of those becomes a losing position you refuse to close, and the refusal masquerades as loyalty, as maturity, as being sensible. This is the part that should genuinely unsettle you. Playing it safe is a phrase that only ever describes the gains column. Nobody plays it safe with their losses. Nobody ever said I'm being careful about the sunk thing they should have walked away from a decade ago. In the domain of gain, you are a coward. In the domain of loss, you are reckless. And since almost everyone over 30 is quietly operating inside a loss frame, behind where they thought they'd be, older than the version of themselves they had planned, the whole architecture inverts. You think you've been playing defense your entire life. You've been all in on a bad hand, refusing to fold, calling it prudence, which leads directly into the thing that makes this worse. Because the damage isn't only in the positions you refuse to close, it's in what happens to a system that never gets shaken. Finding 3. The forest that was protected to death. August 1910. A firestorm swept through Idaho, Montana, and Washington and burned 3 million acres in 2 days. 87 people died. They called it the Big Blow-Up, and it terrified the young United States Forest Service into a doctrine that lasted most of a century. Every fire, everywhere, extinguished immediately. By 1935, it was formal policy. Any fire spotted was to be controlled by 10 o'clock the following morning. For decades, it worked beautifully. Fires were caught small, the public was safe, the forests were protected, and underneath them, something was accumulating. Small fires are not a malfunction of a forest. They are its metabolism. They clear the deadfall, thin the undergrowth, open the cones of certain pines that require heat to release seed, suppress them, and the fuel doesn't disappear. It just stops burning. Year after year, the floor of the forest thickens with material that would have burned in a dozen ordinary seasons, and now sits there, dry, stacked, waiting. In 1988, Yellowstone caught. By the time it stopped, fire had moved through nearly 800,000 acres, around a third of the entire park. Not because the park had been neglected, because it had been protected with total success for 70 years. Nassim Taleb built an entire framework on this class of phenomenon, and the word he coined for it is the one most people get wrong. Antifragile does not mean tough. It doesn't mean resilient. Resilient means you survive the shock unchanged. Antifragile means the shock is your food, that the system requires disorder to maintain its own integrity, and that in the absence of stressors, it does not stay the same. It degrades silently while appearing stable. Bone requires load or it thins. Muscle requires tearing or it wastes. Immune systems require exposure or they turn on their host. A career without periodic exposure to the possibility of failure doesn't hold steady. It quietly loses the capacity to survive failure at all and then meets its first real one at 45 with no muscle whatsoever. The absence of visible volatility is not the absence of risk. It is very often the accumulation of risk, hidden by the smoothness of the surface. And there's a strategic implication almost nobody follows, which is where this gets genuinely useful. Taleb's answer isn't take more risk. His answer is that most people distribute risk in the worst possible shape, a broad middle, moderately exposed, moderately committed, enough skin in the game to be badly hurt, not enough to be paid if it works, the mortgage size to be slightly uncomfortable, the side project given some hours, the honesty offered in measured doses. The alternative is a barbell, extreme safety on one end, the parts of your life that must not be gambled with, protected absolutely, and on the other end, a small allocation of genuinely aggressive exposure, where the downside is capped and survivable, and the upside isn't. The middle is the death zone. The middle is where you take real damage in exchange for imaginary returns. Most lives are lived almost entirely in the middle, and the reason for that isn't stupidity or cowardice or bad planning. It's something much older, and it was measured with unusual precision in 1988. Finding 4. The life that can never be proven wrong. William Samuelson and Richard Zeckhauser published a paper that year with a plain title, Status Quo Bias in Decision Making. They ran a series of experiments in which people were given a decision, say, how to allocate an inheritance across several investments. When the scenario was presented neutrally, choices spread out sensibly across the options. But when one option was described as the one they were already holding, that option's popularity jumped enormously. Nothing about it had changed, only its position had. Then they went into the field, and the field data is the part that should make your skin crawl. They looked at how employees at Harvard chose health plans. New enrollees, arriving fresh, distributed themselves across the available plans according to what actually suited them. Existing enrollees, given the same new options, overwhelmingly stayed where they were, including in plans that were now demonstrably worse for their situation. Then they examined retirement fund allocations across an entire working population. How many times, across a career spanning decades, did the average participant change their allocation? The most common number was 0, not one adjustment, not one reconsideration, a choice made in a fluorescent-lit room at 26 by a person who no longer exists, silently governing money for 40 years. That is the shape of most human lives, not chosen, defaulted, and defended afterwards with reasoning invented to fit. Underneath that bias sits a second mechanism, and it's the one that turns an inconvenience into something closer to a slow-acting poison. This is where the regret research from the opening comes back. Thomas Gilovich and Victoria Medvec at Cornell spent years mapping how regret behaves across time. They found that regret has a temporal signature almost nobody notices while living inside it. In the short term, days, weeks, regrets of action dominate. You did the thing, it went badly. The pain is sharp and immediate and specific. But those regrets fade, reliably, because the human mind is exceptionally good at metabolizing completed events. You learn what actually happened, you extract a lesson, you build a story where the failure becomes a chapter. Psychologists call this the psychological immune system, and it is remarkably effective. Daniel Gilbert's work at Harvard showed that people consistently overestimate how long and how severely a bad outcome will damage them, precisely because they can't feel this repair mechanism in advance. Regrets of inaction do not fade, they grow. And the reason is beautiful in the way that a well-designed trap is beautiful. A regret of action is closed. You know how it ended. It can be measured, weighed, filed. A regret of inaction has no ending. There is no data. You never found out what would have happened, which means the unlived version is never falsified, and anything that cannot be falsified is free to inflate forever. Every year, the road not taken gets a little wider. The person you didn't become gets a little more successful. The love you didn't pursue gets a little more perfect, because they never got the chance to be ordinary at breakfast. The safe life doesn't protect you from suffering. It converts your suffering into a form that can never be resolved. That's what those 3 out of 4 are. Not memories of pain, open files, wounds that stay wet because the air of reality never touched them. And if you're feeling something uncomfortable right now, a specific name, a specific year, a specific door, hold on to it, because everything you've been taught about that feeling is backwards. And the man who figured out why died at 42 in Copenhagen, having made exactly the mistake he warned everyone else about. The dizziness. In 1844, a Danish writer published a book under a false name. The name was Vigilius Hofniensis, roughly the Watchman of Copenhagen. The real author was Søren Kierkegaard, and the book was The Concept of Anxiety. Kierkegaard opened with an image that has never been improved on. Stand at the edge of a cliff. Look down, you feel fear, the ordinary, sensible fear of falling. But underneath it, if you're honest, you notice a second sensation that has nothing to do with the drop, a pull, a flicker of awareness that you could step forward, that nothing in the universe is physically preventing you. That second feeling isn't fear of the cliff, it's fear of yourself. Kierkegaard called it the dizziness of freedom. His argument was that anxiety and fear are not variants of the same thing. Fear has an object. A dog, a fall, a knife, a specific danger you can point at. Anxiety has no object. Anxiety is what a creature feels when it becomes aware that it is free, that the future is genuinely undetermined, and that it, not fate, not circumstance, not the plan, will be the author of what happens next, which produces a conclusion that should rearrange the furniture in your head. Anxiety is not proportional to danger. It is proportional to possibility. The things that make you most anxious are not the things most likely to destroy you. They are the things you are most capable of doing. The idea that won't leave you alone at 3 in the morning isn't haunting you because it's dangerous. It's haunting you because some part of you has already run the numbers and concluded you could actually pull it off. And that conclusion is intolerable because it removes your excuse. You have been reading a compass as though it were a smoke alarm. Every time that specific dread rises about a specific move, you have treated it as a verdict. This is a warning. This is my instinct protecting me. It was never a warning. It was a reading. It was your own freedom registering on an instrument you were never taught to interpret. And the tragedy of Kierkegaard is that he knew all of this, wrote it more clearly than anyone before or since, and still didn't do it. In September 1840, he became engaged to a young woman named Regine Olsen. He was, by every account including his own, in love with her. 13 months later, he broke it off. He sent the ring back with a letter. He engineered a public performance of being a scoundrel so that she'd be humiliated less by being left. He never married. He never courted anyone else. For the remaining 14 years of his life, he wrote at an inhuman pace, book after book, most of them circling, in disguised form, the exact decision he had made and could not undo. He willed his entire estate to her. He was still writing about her when he collapsed in the street in 1855, aged 42, having spent almost precisely the last of his inheritance. The man who diagnosed the dizziness of freedom stepped back from the edge and spent the rest of his life describing the view. That's the cost. Not dramatic, not violent. A long, articulate, extraordinarily productive life spent orbiting one moment where he chose the safe thing. So what actually happens if you don't? Not the fantasy version, not the montage. What actually occurs in the body and in the room on the day you finally do the thing you've been circling. Hour 1, the withdrawal. The first thing that happens is not courage, it's nausea. There's a specific physical sequence that people report almost universally and almost never expect. The moment the irreversible act completes, the resignation sent, the sentence spoken, the flight booked, the truth told, the body registers it as catastrophe. Cold hands, hollow stomach, a drop in the chest like a lift cable going slack. Every mammalian alarm you own fires simultaneously because you have just voluntarily removed a wall you spent years building. Anyone who tells you this phase feels like liberation is selling something. But wait about 90 minutes, because the second thing that happens is the one nobody predicts, and it's the entire reason this is worth doing. The dread drops, not the difficulty. The difficulty is often just beginning. The dread, the specific, chronic, low-grade anticipatory hum you've been carrying for however many months or years you spent not doing this. It stops, because dread is a tax levied on imagined futures, and you no longer have an imagined future about this. You have a situation. Situations are handled. Futures are only suffered. Seneca, writing to a younger man about fear, put it in one line that survived 2,000 years. The man who suffers before it's necessary suffers more than is necessary. He wasn't offering comfort. He was pointing at an accounting error. You do not get charged once for a frightening thing. You get charged every single day you rehearse it, and then once more on the day it happens. And the rehearsals almost always cost more in total than the event. Gilbert's affective forecasting research puts numbers on the same error. People predicting how they'll feel after a rejection, a firing, a breakup consistently overshoot both the intensity and the duration. The reason is that they simulate the event and forget to simulate their own recovery. They picture the wound. They cannot picture the scar tissue because they have never met it in advance. So the first day is not triumph. The first day is a strange, jittery quiet. The alarm has gone off. The building is still standing, and the part of your nervous system that was screaming has nothing left to say. Then the second thing starts, and it involves other people. Month 1. 27 years. In the summer of 1929, a 25-year-old surgical intern named Werner Forssmann was working at a small hospital in Eberswalde, north of Berlin. He had an idea, based on an old French engraving of a horse with a tube run into its heart, that it should be possible to reach the human heart through a vein in the arm. His superior forbade it absolutely. So Forssmann charmed the operating theater nurse into helping. She agreed on the condition that he perform it on her. He strapped her to the table, waited until she was secured, then anesthetized his own arm and cut into it. He threaded a thin urological catheter up through the vein in his elbow, 65 centimeters. Then he untied the nurse, and the two of them walked down the stairs to the X-ray department with the tube still inside him, so he could photograph where it had arrived. The image showed the catheter sitting in the right atrium of his own beating heart. It is one of the foundational moments of modern cardiology. Every cardiac catheterization performed anywhere on Earth descends from that walk down the stairs. He was fired. The senior physicians of German medicine treated the experiment as a stunt, a piece of self-promotion, a violation of decorum. He was pushed out of cardiology altogether. He spent the following decades as a urologist in provincial towns, doing unremarkable work, largely forgotten by the field he had opened. In 1956, 27 years later, the Nobel Committee awarded him the prize in medicine, alongside two Americans who had built on what he'd done. Reporters found him working in a small-town clinic. He said he felt like a village priest who had just been told he'd been made a bishop. Hold the shape of that story, because it's the honest one. The world does not reward risk on schedule. It rewards risk on a lag, unevenly, and sometimes not at all in a time frame you'd consider useful. The month after you stop playing it safe is frequently the worst month, not the best. The people around you will not applaud. Some of them will become subtly hostile, and the hostility will be dressed as concern. Are you sure? Have you thought this through? I just don't want to see you get hurt. Understand what's actually happening in those conversations. Your choice is not neutral information to them. It's an audit. Every person who made the safe version of your decision now has evidence sitting in front of them that the safe version was a choice rather than a necessity. That's intolerable. The pressure they apply is not about you. It's them trying to restore the belief that they had no options. Which is why the composition of the room around you changes within weeks. Some people go quiet, some get sharp, and a category you didn't know existed appears. People who did something similar, who never mentioned it, and who suddenly start talking to you differently. You've become a different kind of object in their world. The person who has demonstrated they'll accept a cost is priced differently by everyone around them, permanently. Year 1. Vesuvius. In 1882, Nietzsche published The Gay Science. Section 283 carries a heading that translates roughly as preparatory human beings, and it contains the passage everyone half quotes and almost nobody reads properly. He tells his readers to build their cities on the slopes of Vesuvius, to send their ships into unmapped water, to live at war with their equals and with themselves. Vesuvius was not a metaphor to a 19th century European. It was the mountain that had buried Pompeii under 6 meters of ash, with the population still in position, a woman holding a door, a dog on a chain, bread still in an oven. Nietzsche was not saying take a calculated risk. He was saying place your entire life somewhere it could be erased and live there on purpose, because that is the only soil where certain things grow. He was writing that in the healthiest and happiest year of his adult life. Within 7 years, he would collapse in a street in Turin and never write another lucid sentence. He knew the mountain was real. That was the point. What he was describing, and this is the part that only becomes visible after about a year, is not an action. It's a shift in what your nervous system considers normal. The first act is hard because it's unprecedented. The 10th is routine, not because you've become braver, but because your reference point has moved. Kahneman's central insight was that humans evaluate everything relative to a reference point, and the reference point is set by whatever you've recently experienced, which means it isn't fixed, which means it can be deliberately moved. A year into living without the safety architecture, ordinary difficulty stops registering. The confrontational email is nothing. The unfamiliar room is nothing. The prospect of being disliked by someone whose approval you used to arrange your week around barely produces a signal. Not because you've hardened, because the scale you're measuring against now contains something genuinely heavy, and everything else has been replotted next to it. And there's a second-order effect that nobody warns you about, which is the closest thing to real power in any of this. You become expensive to threaten. Almost every form of leverage another person holds over you runs on the same circuit, the assumption that you will pay a high price to avoid a loss. The boss knows what you won't risk. The partner knows which conversation you'll avoid. The family knows which disappointment you'll organize your entire life to prevent. Their power isn't personal, it's actuarial. They've priced your fear and they're trading on it. The person who has already accepted a real loss and survived it has broken the pricing model. There's nothing to bid with. And people can sense this long before they can articulate it, which is precisely why a certain kind of calm gets described as intimidating. It isn't intimidating, it's just unpurchasable. The cost, nobody prices. An Australian woman named Bronnie Ware spent several years in palliative care, sitting with people in the final weeks of their lives. She wasn't running a study, she was doing a job, and she started writing down what people said as the end approached, because a pattern kept appearing. The regret at the top of her list was not about money, or missed pleasure, or things unbought. It was the wish to have had the courage to live a life true to themselves, rather than the life other people expected. The second was about work. She noted that it came from every single male patient she nursed. all of them. They had missed their children's childhoods and their partner's company, and they had done it in exchange for a structure that had felt, at the time, absolutely mandatory. That's what the safe life bills you for, and it doesn't send an invoice until the account can no longer be settled. But it would be a lie to end here as though the trade is free. It isn't. Some risks simply cost you. Forssmann lost 27 years of a career and only got it back by accident of a committee's attention. Plenty of people who take the same class of leap never get the phone call. The businesses fail. The move doesn't work. The confession ends the relationship rather than saving it. There is no version of this in which the mountain is decorative. What changes is not whether you suffer. It's whose decision the suffering came from, because that's the actual comparison. And almost nobody makes it honestly. The choice was never between a life with pain and a life without it. It was between two kinds of pain with completely different properties. One kind is acute, finite, and metabolizable. It arrives, it's terrible, it teaches something, and the psychological immune system eventually converts it into a story you can tell. The other kind is chronic, formless, and permanent, because it's built out of a thing that never happened, and therefore can never be concluded. Sharp and closable, or dull and open forever. That's the whole menu. Go back to Dresden for a second, to the square with no lights and no signs and no lines on the road. The reason it worked was not that danger had been removed. The danger was still there. Several tons of metal moving through a space full of soft bodies. What had been removed was the illusion that someone else was managing it. And the instant that illusion vanished, people woke up. They looked at each other. They slowed down. They started making real decisions instead of following instructions. That's what happens the day you stop playing it safe. Not fearlessness. The opposite. You get your fear back. The real one, the accurate one. The one that's actually about your life instead of about a signal on a pole. You stop being a unit processing a system and start being a person negotiating with a world. Most people will read all of this, feel the recognition move through them, and change nothing. That's not a moral failure. It's status quo bias functioning exactly as designed, and it will produce a life that is defensible in every particular and regretted as a whole. One thought to sit with tonight, though, the one nobody says out loud: the safe life is not the life without risk. It's the life where the risk gets transferred to someone who wasn't in the room when the decision was made. Your own self, 30 years older, holding a file that can never be closed, paying for a caution they never agreed to and cannot appeal. That person is real. They exist. You are, right now, making choices on their behalf. They just don't get a vote. If this is the kind of thinking you'd rather have late at night than the comfortable version, subscribe. There's more of it here.